This week, we will have Aisha Rimi with us, and she's going to give us her stories. And I'm really fascinated about her story because when I spoke to her in the week, she gave me an insight about some of the things, and having read some of the things, I know we're in for a real treat with regards to her as a Black woman and a Black Muslim woman. So I'm not going to say any more because it's not my experience, but I'm going to hand over to Aisha, and we're going to just explore that notion of what it is to be a Black Muslim woman. So Aisha, let's just switch over. And we're going to do it in speaker view. So Aisha, thank you so much for coming with us, for joining us today. Can you just give us a little bit of information about yourself, what it is that you do, and then we'll go into the main discussion about your experiences as a Black Muslim woman.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I work in the Students' Union at the moment as a marketing and communications coordinator. But in my spare time, I do a lot of other things. So I'm currently the director of an organisation called the Black Muslim Girl, which serves to highlight the voices of Black Muslim women, because we're a minority within a minority, so it's often a voice that you don't hear. I also am a co-host on the Black Muslim Girl podcast, where we talk about issues affecting our communities and just like current trends and stuff like that. And then I also founded a platform earlier this year called Black Girls Write Too, because in my spare time I like to write a lot, and I found that there wasn't really a space as a Black woman for me to feel like I could really unleash my creativity in that sense. And often when I went to like literary events and stuff, it was very not diverse. So I wanted to create a space where women like myself could feel included.
Okay, I think you've touched on quite a number of points, which goes into this whole idea of belonging, the idea of belonging as a Black woman, the idea of belonging as a Muslim woman, the idea of belonging as a writer. All of these things are factors which I think are really important for us to consider. So you mentioned that you've started, or you're involved with, an organisation, Black Muslim Girls. Explain, how did that come about? What was the rationale? Why did you join? What was that about? Why did you go into that?
Yeah, so it was actually founded by my friend, and the idea behind it is that as Black Muslim women, we're a minority within a minority. So we're Black and we're Muslim, and on top of that, we're a woman. So kind of the trifecta of struggles, I guess. So it was created so that there was a space for Black Muslim women to feel like they were included, like they had a voice, because often if you talk to a lot of Black Muslims, whether they're men or women, you'll find that they don't really feel included within the Muslim community here in the UK, because there is unfortunately racism within the Muslim community. And often when you do see Islam or Muslims represented, you only see one look, one story. So it was created so that we could have this space where we feel included and really like shed a light on issues that affect us. And yeah, so I got involved because it was actually something I had an idea of creating a few years prior, but I just never acted upon it. So when I saw that this existed, I was so happy, because I finally felt like I could be embraced in a community like that. And so I joined firstly as a podcast host, and then later on my friend was like, why don't you join like on the team? And so we've organized events and different activities. We now have a small team with us as well, so yeah, it's just growing and growing.
Could you give us a sense of some of the activities that you do and the rationale behind why it is that you do those events, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so one of the events we did literally just before lockdown was called The Woman in Me. So it was an event that was focused on different aspects of womanhood. So we had 3 different panels. One of young women who were like in their careers, single, just navigating life, sort of talking about how they're exploring their identity as Black Muslim women and their careers and their career path as well. And then we had another panel which was slightly older women. Well, they were like, it was mainly that they were married with kids, and talking about how they were balancing that, because that's a topic of interest in our community. We discussed that and shed a light on different aspects of what it means to be a mother in this climate as well. And then we had a panel actually that were made up of my mum and my friend's mum, talking about their journeys as older women, and it was interesting seeing like the similarities, the differences, and yeah, so we got to see women at different stages, and yeah.
I like that idea of that intergenerational experiences and sharing those experiences between. So what were some of the similarities that you were able to draw from their experiences?
Yeah, so it's, some of it was kind of I'm trying to remember now. It's just the struggles with identity. That was something that came up, and especially sort of raising children in a completely different environment to the ones that they grew up in. So it's kind of that, trying to allow your kids to be your kids, to be themselves, but also not wanting to lose that part of their identity. And I think that's something that I find that my generation are dealing with as well, is that you want to have your identity and have your culture and everything, but then it's also like, but you live in a completely different country to that your parents grew up in, and how do you balance all of that and your identity? So it was kind of similar but different, but yeah.
No, I think I get you. I'm just thinking with regards to a couple of things which you just said about the identity and the development of your identity, and that not conflict, or could be kind of a conflict between maintaining an identity and the way people see you and the way others interact with you. Because one of the things which you said was about the idea of developing the Black Muslim woman or the Black Muslim girls was because of how you're perceived as a Muslim, even within the Muslim community.
Yeah.
Could we explore that a little bit more? Because that's also about identity issues as well. So what is it about? Can you give me a little bit of information with regards to what is it about being a Black Muslim woman in the overall scheme of things, which is not problematic, but could be construed as more difficult?
Well, it's this constant of feeling of having to sort of defend your Muslimness and constantly justify it. I've had experiences where so for example, I grew up in Cambridge, and the local mosque would do like an open day in the library. And one time I went mainly because there were free samosas, but I went and I started talking to the woman on the table, and she was like, "Oh, would you like to know more about Islam?" And I was like, "Oh, well, actually, I'm Muslim." And she goes, "Oh, were you born Muslim?" And I was like, "Yes." She was like, "Are your parents Muslim?" And I was like, "Yes." She was like, "Have they always been Muslim?" And I was like, "Yes." Like, why are you asking me this? But it was because of this perception that it was like, "Oh, you're Black and you're Muslim. Like, how can that be?" And I've had a friend once say to me like, "Oh, I didn't know there were Black Muslims." I'm like, "Well, actually, I come from a country where just over 50% of the nation is Muslim, so I can tell you there are a lot of Black Muslims in the world." So it's just, so I guess that's what's so great about the TBMG space, is that we don't have to do any explaining, we don't have to do any justifying.
Right.
We're just ourselves. And I've been in spaces where I'm like the only Black Muslim, and it doesn't sometimes, whether it's intentional or unintentional, but you do feel like you don't quite belong, or that you're like, no, like you don't. There's been times where like no one wants to talk to you, and like I've just kind of sat in a space by myself, and like I've tried to greet people and people haven't greeted me back. And so yeah, I mean, you do have some people within the Muslim community that don't like that such a space exists, because they feel like it further segregates the Muslim community. But I feel like until there's no need for a space like it, it will exist. And it's not our fault that we've started up a platform like this. So
I think I understand that concept of not feeling as though you're welcomed or you belong. There was another couple of things which you mentioned about the fact that just over 50% of where your parents are born is Muslim, okay, and that you're here in this country. So what's the reactions? Because you also mentioned about like being almost like being a migrant, where we are migrants. Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question. Were you born here or were you born in Nigeria?
I was born here.
So do you class yourself as Black British?
Yes.
Yes.
I do, yes.
How does that translate to you in terms of how do you feel that you're perceived, you're welcomed or not welcomed?
It's such a identity is such a complex thing, I think, especially the whole Black Britishness. And I also identify as British Nigerian, but then sometimes I'm like, oh, should I actually say Nigerian British? Like, does it matter which way around it goes? So it's a difficult one, and it sometimes depends on the day that you ask me as well. But I think from growing up, I definitely was like, no, I'm Nigerian, like I'm just British by passport, like, I'll just use it to my advantage kind of thing. But then as I grew up and I realized actually there are so many things about me that are inherently British, whether I like it or not, so I have to embrace that. So I became more comfortable with the idea of being British Nigerian. And especially when I would go back to Nigeria on holiday, I'd realize like actually there's some things that I can't relate to you guys. I'm just not, because I'm not from here, essentially. I've never lived there. So at the moment I feel more comfortable saying, British Nigerian, Black British, especially now that I live now living in London, and being around other Black British young people like myself, I feel more comfortable to embrace that kind of label, because we have a shared similar culture. But yeah, growing up, I think also because I grew up in a predominantly white area, so it was kind of, I was trying to like hold on to my heritage. And then I also had some people telling me I'm English, and I was like, no, I'm not English. So it was just all these different labels and just trying to find what I felt suited me best.
No, I totally appreciate that. So you said part of your identity or your sense of belonging has also come from the fact that now you're in London and more surrounded with other Black people. How do other Black people perceive you as a Black Muslim? Is there any perceptions, anything like that? Or is it just not an issue?
It's so when I was first at university, because I wasn't covering my hair at the time. So when people would find out I was Muslim, they'd be like, oh, like really? I'm like, yeah. And they'd be like, oh, but you're not that strict, are you? You don't really practice, because I wasn't covering my hair. And I was like, no, I'm practicing. I'm very like, I am very practicing. It's part of my life, and everything kind of revolves around it. So there was that kind of perception of like, oh, you can't be that Muslim if I wasn't covering. But I don't think that's just a Black a Black perception. I think that's kind of a non-Muslim perception in general. I think that's kind of like what the media and entertainment industry want to show you, that you're only really practicing, or if you cover your hair. or look or dress a certain way. But I think I've definitely found it difficult sometimes in predominantly Black spaces to feel fully comfortable as a Muslim, because of the notion of the kind of assumption that everyone in that area is most likely Christian, because the majority of Black people in this country are Christian. So there has been, times when I was at university and I would go to my Afro-Caribbean Society events, and they'd start quoting Bible verses, and I'm like, okay, this isn't quite me, but I mean, that's fine. But it was just, it was kind of trying to remind people that actually there are Black people that aren't Christian. There are Black people that aren't religious. I have friends that are atheists, so they sometimes don't feel comfortable in that. So I think I answered the question.
No, it's brilliant. That's brilliant. So it's there is a perception that to be a Muslim you must have to show devoutness or something like that. You have to dress, so it's almost conforming to societal stereotypes of what it means to be in a particular group. So to belong to a particular group, you must dress in that particular way.
And it's also a thing in the Muslim community as well, where some people put women that wear the hijab on a higher pedestal, thinking they can do no wrong because they look a certain way. But actually, we're all with our faults, and just because you cover or you dress modestly doesn't mean that you're any better than someone who doesn't. So it's a thing in both communities.
I agree. I'm just wondering, have you had any challenges because you're a Black Muslim woman, like in the workplace or or at university? Is there anything that has challenged you because you're a Black Muslim woman?
I would say this. I've had more sort of things that have made me think, like, I think it was more to do with my Blackness more than being a Black Muslim woman.
Right. Okay.
I think, there are definitely, of course, like, I've experienced microaggressions everywhere. And but there were times as well, I remember in my first job after university, where I felt like I wasn't really progressing as much as my white counterparts in particular, and I tried to move on. I applied for the jobs for the promotions in the organization, but didn't get them. And then I think the final straw was when someone who'd been there for 3 months then suddenly became my manager, and I was like, that's enough. It's time for me to leave, I think. So there's been that sort of career challenge that I've experienced, and I feel like, and I've noticed it on an organizational level, where every person of color has found it difficult to progress, and has kind of just been stunted and then end up just having to leave because they're not progressing. So I've had challenges in that sense, yes.
How does that make you feel?
Frustrated. Frustrated. It's annoying because, especially when you put in the work and you put in the effort, and then it just doesn't, it gets recognized in some way, but then in the way that you really want it to be recognized, it's not. So frustrated, I think, is the best word.
No, I totally understand that, and I'm sure many of the listeners would also agree. I'm just wondering, I want to just explore something else just slightly, because one of the other things which you mentioned, or was mentioned, is that you also write. And so Black representation in the written space. What was it that made you, or why do you write, or what do you write, and how does it make you feel?
So I've been writing since I was little. It was something that I've always loved to do. And growing up, I didn't really like the same authors that I grew up reading, like Black authors that I grew up reading, are the ones that I'm still talking about today, because there just hasn't been a huge I think now there's definitely a wave of new uh,
writers.
Yes, a wave of new writers of color that are coming up, but it's taken so long. I've been, I for example, I love Mallory Blackman. I've been reading her since I was like 10. But it's like this, it's still kind of just her, and there needs to be more. So it's just I started Black Girls Write Too because I love to write and I wanted to meet other writers like myself. I felt like the Black Muslim girl in me was covered. There was a space for me there, but I couldn't find a place as a writer. And then I think the when it clicked was when I went to the London Literary Festival last summer, and I went and they had a series of guest speakers, and every single one of them talked about diversity and how we need more diversity, blah 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 blah. And I looked around the room and I was like, well, I don't see much diversity. I mean, I'm sure there was diversity in sort of like backgrounds and all that kind of stuff, but like visually I couldn't see the diversity. So I was like, well, there's something that's not quite matching here. So
what would you say is your genre which you like to write about? Is there anything in particular that you like to write about?
I'm such a girl. I like writing romance.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's what I like to write. Yeah, I'll be honest. But my characters are like, there's always this there's always an essence of Nigeria though in my stories.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I always have to go back home.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm quite girly like that.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I like that idea. You mentioned that you like to go back home. So I know when I was growing up, I had visions of my parents from the Caribbean. I had visions of the Caribbean largely based on their experiences. So when I first went back to the Caribbean, it didn't seem to match up with the, how can I put it? It didn't quite match up with my imagination from the stories which were told to me. Right. So how does yours match up to, because in your writing, how do you get that sense of belonging to a state and a place where you've never really actually, you may have visited, but you've never lived there? So how do you get that across?
I think because I've been going back to Nigeria since I was a baby, I've always been able to have an idea of it for myself. It's not something that I've had to that has been told to me through stories or whatever. Like I've experienced it and I've lived it for 6 weeks at a time. It's definitely different from the Nigeria my parents grew up in, and what they experienced. But I think I've been there enough and I've experienced enough that I can make my own sort of judgments and stories from it. But 100%, it's not something that I've experienced for anything longer than like 6 weeks. And I do hope to one day though. It'd be quite interesting to go and actually make my own life there and my own experiences there that aren't through my parents. Yeah.
I'm going to just ask you a little bit about your parents, because I'm seeing some stuff which is coming through on the chat, which is talking about the fact that that sense of feeling foreign when you go back to, say, Nigeria. And do your parents share any of that are they viewed as foreign when they go back, or do they still have that strong sense of belonging to Nigeria, for example?
Oh, they do. They have such. I mean, my dad's there most of the time, anyways. So he's basically Nigerian. Like he's there. So that's fine for him. My mum, she's been here since she was 15 or 16, sorry. But still, she still has a very, very strong sense of identity and there are definitely some things like she too experiences though, where she realizes like, okay, this is the Britishness in me. But she's still got that strong attachment to Nigeria, and it's just home for them. It's home, and I mean it's home for me too, but in a different sense. So yeah.
How do you mean in a different sense?
It's home in the sense that it feels like home because there's family,
right?
But I'm always trying to come back here. I'm always thinking about coming back here to the UK because that's ultimately home, because this is where my life is. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's quite complex.
It is it's that familiarity. You're familiar with here more so than there.
Exactly. Yeah, because like right now I'm like, oh yes, I really really want to go back to Nigeria. I haven't been there for a couple of years now. I want to go, but once I get there, there'll be a point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to come back now.
Right. Yeah.
Even though I'm like have that yearning to go back at the moment.
Yeah.
But
yeah. That's really interesting. I would like to ask some more questions, but I'm also seeing that there's a lot of people who have got questions which are flooding in now. So I'm going to ask if we could ask if anyone would like to ask a question, then you can address those questions.
Sure. Yeah.
Normally I'd pause the recording at this point, but if you don't mind, could we just carry on recording?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is everyone okay with that? If they're not, then just make some kind of sign. Okay. I'm going to ask William. You've got a question. Would you mind asking your question?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Thanks. That's a brilliant talk. So my question is, are you able to bring your Black Muslim identity to bear on your current role in communication and marketing? Bring that identity to broaden the base of how communication and marketing looks like at Imperial, or is Imperial quite corporate, making it difficult to accept different forms of difference in terms of different forms of difference and diversity?
Yeah. I feel like, before I started in the role, there was already obviously like a brand and a voice that was created. So I kind of just came in and had to like fit in with it. I think the only thing that I've really been able to do, but I felt like they were doing a good job of it anyways beforehand, was just making sure that, when we're showcasing the student body, whether on our social media or any other sort of marketing and branding materials, is that it just had a diverse look to it. That's it really, and that's all I really felt like I could bring. But I feel like the brand, the tone of voice, everything was quite set already, so there wasn't really much like maneuver to it. But yeah, not as great an impact as I'd like probably, but yeah, that's all I've really feel like I've been able to give. Yeah.
Okay, that's brilliant. I see a couple of hands. CFAS? Is it CFAS, if I said your name right?
Yes, that's my name. Yeah.
If you would like to ask your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would just like to ask, has your faith been of a very big impact to your current work at the moment? Has it been of a great influence as your faith background and your beliefs? How impactful have they been to your current work that you're doing? Thank you.
As in my current work in Imperial, or like...
Yes, at Imperial. Yes.
Oh, I don't think it really has had much influence on my work at Imperial. I'm just trying to think. Well, I mean, for example, like during Ramadan this year, I tried to we made sure that we highlighted how it was a very different Ramadan for students this year, and got members of the student body to do like Instagram takeovers and stuff like that, and we got the Islamic Society involved. So in that sense, yes, but I think on a day-to-day level, it hasn't really had much impact on like what I do, I think. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thanks for that question. Very good. Sunday, I believe you've got a question as well.
Yes, Aisha, thank you very much. Really, I could connect with what you're saying there, even though I'm not a Muslim, but back in Nigeria, as you know, I'm from Nigeria as well. We don't differentiate between Christian and Muslim. We all celebrate everything together.
Yeah.
My question is that you said that you go to Nigeria, you do have this urge of, wanting to be there. When you are there, do you get this feeling of belonging there as well or not? Or after 2 weeks, suddenly you wanted to come back?
I mean, there are other things that make me want to come back, not the sense of belonging, but like just infrastructure and stuff like that. But in general, I think, and especially like my last visit, I made a lot of friends and a lot of new contacts that really, really made me feel at home. And I think that's what's brought on this new. So, I mean, I've always had the urge to like go back and experience like maybe a year or two there on my own. But that's what really, those new connections that I made really made me want to do that. I've always felt like I've belonged. It's just when, I don't know what it is, but like when I go back and like I'm walking on the road or something, I always get stared at. And it's like they know that you're foreign
because you're different.
but I never understand why, because I'll be dressed in traditional clothing, but it's like they can still pinpoint that you're just not quite from there. So
it's like UK is written on your forehead.
Exactly. So in that sense, yes, sometimes I'm just like, oh, I wish I could blend in a little bit more. But I think I do try. I speak my language. I'm very comfortable in any sort of situation that you put me in, any type of home that you send me to. So, yeah.
So anyway, you're not alone on that. I feel that too every time I go back.
Definitely.
And the some of the things you described at the beginning that you're involved in terms of platform groups and all that. Where do you get the time from? Please sell me some of your time. I need more time.
I don't know either. I'm trying to balance it as well. I'm really trying to balance it. I'm just the type of person that likes to be busy and likes to do lots of stuff. And if you ask my mom, I've been doing that since I was at school. So I think it's just a part of my personality. Yeah.
Well done. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thanks.
Definitely. Thank you. Brilliant. Abba, I believe you've got a question as well. Abba?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Wayne.
No problem.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
And hi, Aisha. Thank you
Hi.
for an interesting discussion. 2 questions. When you do visit Nigeria, where are the places that you visit?
Yeah.
And secondly, because, of course, you've had this experience of being able to see what I'd call the possibility of being excluded or being marginalized. How has that played out when you go to Nigeria? Are you able to see the kinds of, the reason why I'm asking the question is because I spent like the first 30 plus years of my life in Nigeria. And then I came here. And I realized that when I was in Nigeria, I was colorblind. I didn't see color. I didn't understand color politics. Even though I taught history in the university for years, and I talked about segregation, apartheid, and all sorts. It's not until I came into this country that I really did understand what it feels like to be at the receiving end. You've gone on the reverse journey. You've been born here, grew up here. How has that played out in the way you see things, if you can understand the question? Thank you.
Brilliant.
I'll start with the second question first. How has it played out? I think it's just made me someone. My mom actually said it once about me. She said, "You're the type of person that can just get on with anyone, like regardless of background, regardless of anything." And I think that's something that I take when I go to Nigeria without. It's not something that I knew I was doing. I think it's just what I do, I guess. But because, you know, in Nigeria we have a lot of different tribes, ethnicities, and for me, I just see you as Nigerian. Like, I go there and I don't really, it's not a thought to me whether you're this person or that person. I just I embrace everyone for who they are. And so I think maybe that feeling of knowing what it's like to feel excluded has made me just want to, like, embrace everyone, regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of tribe, regardless of religion. And when I do go back, I tend to stay in the northern parts of Nigeria because my family and I are Hausa, so we mainly go to Abuja, Kaduna, we'll go to Katsina because that's where my dad's from, go to Niger State as well because my mom's from there, and then we also go to Kano as well because so we kind of just do like a tour around northern Nigeria.
Thank you. I find that interesting because you seem to suggest that you just somehow blend in, fit in, and you're comfortable in it. So I don't know, it's not necessarily something you'll be able to answer now, but maybe a question for everybody like us to ponder. Why is it that in one situation we're able to blend in and be comfortable, and in another situation you are forced to stand out somewhat, even from your own feeling? You can sense it, you can feel it, even when you don't want to feel like that. You just feel pushed to the margins and you're wondering what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's a very good question.
That's a good question. Don't know.
That might be something that we're all going to have to ponder. Because definitely. It's a very good question.
Sorry, hi everyone.
Please,
I think that's a really good question. Why in some situations you feel really comfortable and in others you feel something, and it's really hard to describe it. And I've been thinking about it a lot at Imperial. So I work in community engagement, and I feel so comfortable with who I am in my role, because part of my role is about engaging with diverse voices, and I'm of benefit being a BAME person. But then when I'm in where I live, in kind of West London, I feel really uncomfortable when I go to the GP surgery and I sit there and I have people staring at me, or I feel uncomfortable when I'm walking down the high street. And I think for me, a lot of it has to do with agency. So when I feel like I have an agency to be in a space, I'm a lot more comfortable, and those pressures or those kind of shadows with him. But where I feel like I don't have agency, like walking down the street or being in a GP surgery with my grandma, because people are like, oh look, she's foreign, she's probably not paying for NHS. All of those fears come in. So for me, that's a journey that I think I'm discovering. That helps in any way.
Very good point.
That's a good point. Yeah,
it's a very good.
May I just say, just as the lady just mentioned just now, I wonder if it's the gaze. Like, sometimes the way that people gaze at you or look at you, it makes you feel uncomfortable and as if you shouldn't belong. My husband recently came over from Jamaica and came to live with me here in London. And one thing that he, kind of like what was mentioned before, he'd never experienced racism. He's the minority in Jamaica, so he's come here and has felt the gaze of white men and women, things like sitting on trains and people gathering their stuff, and he's just like, what's all that about? Or coming up like on the platform and saying good morning to people, and people kind of looking at him up and down, and he's just like, what is that? Your country's rude. And I'm like, welcome to England. So it's really sad, but he's never had to experience it. But what we've had to both work through and for him and talk about is the gaze, and that is how they are looking at you, and it's going to evoke some feelings. It's going to make you feel guilty for no reason. Do you know what I mean? But that's not the truth. You have to accept that as truth. And there are some times when you can voice it and you can speak out about it, and then you choose to other times just be like, you know what, allow you, walk on. I'm living my life. I've got my job. Got So I do wonder at times the gaze on you, and you noticing that gaze, and you being in maybe a place where you're the minority, and how that affects you feeling comfortable in a space.
So true.
Very good point, Felicia. Because that kind of like came back to the point which Aisha made earlier on, where she said when she was walking through the streets of Nigeria, even though she was dressed and looked and felt like she should fit in, it was almost as though she felt that she didn't fit in, and they knew that she didn't fit in. And it's about the gaze. I like the way that you describe it as gaze. That's I really do like that terminology. Do we have any other questions or points? Because I'm just wary of the time that we are almost there.
I think to add to that, Wayne, opposite end of talking about the gaze, something that came up when we did the impact course last year. I see there's a few of my fellow impact people listening in. And in one of the sessions, we spoke about bringing your whole self to work. In the sense of, we're at Imperial, that we may be not complaining about certain aspects of it, but to say, how is Imperial going to change their culture? How is anything going to change if we're being part of the system and we're not kind of bringing ourselves who we are? And I find, as a kind of a second generation person, I still am struggling with being able to do that, in the sense that I just got used to being who I needed to be in any given situation. If I'm at home and with family, I can be one way. When I was at school, I was another way. Then when I went into the workplace, it's like, this is how I need to be in a workplace, so I can feel comfortable there, that they can feel comfortable, I can feel comfortable, and it's just kind of blend in. And when it came up about bringing your whole self to work, I had to really kind of sit and think, do I even know what that is? Because I've just got so used to being who I need to be, or who I think I need to be, for who I'm with.
Just missed the end of that sentence. Well, I did anyhow. Could you just repeat the last part about who you need to be and how you need to be?
So it's like me. So my issue is wondering about, how do I bring my whole self to work if I don't know? I'm changing who I am for who I'm with. So then knowing really who am I, that I can just be me in all situations without having to try and fit and squeeze into what I think I should be in a certain situation.
That's a very good point. And the question is it something that we do all have to navigate, that space of authenticity? And what is it that brings our authentic self when we're at work? There was a question which was asked earlier on. Guys, I want us to carry on talking, but I've realized that what the time is, and I don't want anyone to say, you see, Imi just doesn't stick to time, right? So with your permission, I'm gonna say my thank yous, right? Firstly, I'm gonna just say a big thank you to, no, just before I turn away, I do my thank yous. Aisha, I'm gonna ask one final question. And that final question is, what advice would you give to your younger self? So someone coming up now, young Muslim girl, what advice would you give to them about moving forward in this day and age?
I would say be comfortable in all your identities, and I'm just thinking back to younger me, I would say don't feel like you need to change any aspect of yourself for anyone either, because if people really like you, they'll accept all of you, and if they won't, then that's their problem.
Okay.
Okay,
like
that.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
So I want to just give you a big thanks for being on the Belonging series today. It's been absolutely fantastic. I've learned so much about that whole idea, those concepts of belonging, identity, multiple identities, multiple homes, home from home, where is home, kind of thing.
Thank you so much.
No, it's been really good. And the questions from everyone who contributed, again, brilliant. Thank you all. So what I'm going to do in this final session is just to highlight what's going to be happening next week in terms of the Belonging series, because it is every Friday we do this series. So next week we will be having Professor Chris Jackson will be giving his experiences. Many of you will know or will have seen Chris in his volcano work on and stuff like that, but I'm not going to say any more. Next week Chris will be with us and be giving his experiences. So for now I'm going to say thank you and goodbye. If anyone wants to stay on for a little conversation afterwards, then please feel free. But thank you once again for joining us with this Belonging series.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.